Welcome to the first ever episode of The Elephant in the Room with Bradley Devlin. I, of course, am your host, Bradley Devlin. Today, we're going to be breaking down the top 10 craziest college courses, as well as talking about Bolton's ousting from the Trump administration and recognizing a lone conservative article that is outstanding. As you may know, school is back in session. I'm sorry to all you conservatives that have to go back to some of the most liberal colleges in America. And with the left's domination of the campus, we thought it was appropriate to go through the 10 craziest college courses we can find. Not all of them political, but certainly some of them. And thank you to those who submitted tweets to our hashtag craziest college course campaign over at Lone Conservatives Twitter. So without further ado, here are the 10 craziest college courses being offered this fall 2019 semester. So apparently there's a comedy and politics course over at Illinois State University coming in at number 10. This was submitted by Matthew Edwards at Matty Edwards 5 on Twitter. Matt said that this class had a lot of potential, but it just became a full frontal Samantha Bee rerun course where they just watched Samantha Bee call Ivanka Trump a feckless C word over and over and over again. And apparently the professor thought it was just absolutely hilarious. So Matt, I'm sorry about that. Don't take that class. You knew when you took that class that there was going to be nothing good that came out of comedy and politics, because politics is bent on ruining comedy, okay? It is. It's bent on ruining comedy. Political correctness, politics, horrible comedic subjects. Horrible. Coming in at number 9, the study of privilege in America at Yale University. Apparently, this course is an examination of inequality, not only through experiences of the poor and marginal, but also through the institution's beliefs, social norms, and everyday practices of the privileged. Wow. It sounds like the kids at Yale who have been living an elite life, most likely their entire lives, are going to finally learn what it is to be elite. As if they weren't elite enough going to Yale University, they're going to learn about key concepts like studying up, what it means to be elite, and privilege. I don't know if this is going to be a check your privilege class or if it's going to be a develop your privilege class, given that it's at Yale University. Maybe these are better suited for, I don't know, community colleges in rough urban areas to learn what it is the elite is doing to this country, because I sure as heck don't think the students at Yale are going to care too much. Number 8 comes courtesy of Daniel Elmore. Go give him a follow on Twitter at Daniel_J_Elmore. This is his hashtag craziest college course. He says his writing and inquiry course wasn't a course that taught you how to, I don't know, develop topics and then write about them either in an argumentative or an expressive fashion like a short story. No. This literally taught you how to write your name in cursive, which is, I don't know, something I learned how to do in the 3rd grade. I mean, has everyone at this school just been printing their name on every single receipt that they've been getting for their entire lives? Did they not know how to create a signature? Absolutely crazy. We have $1.52 trillion worth of student debt in America, and we're using that money to what? To learn how to write our names in cursive. My goodness. And it only gets crazier from here. Here's number 7. It was submitted by Richard Hoover on Twitter at MiniWheats235. This is his hashtag craziest college course. He says that my first semester of undergrad, I took a math credit course about how to play poker, and it was taught by a professor, I kid you not, named Dr. Decker. Yes. This is a Hollywood movie. It has to be. It has to be. I love this class. I don't think this class is crazy at all. I think this class is actually the most worthwhile class in the entire list of these classes. One, because you can actually probably make more money off of poker than you could any of these other courses, even though you could probably also lose more money. I don't know. With the amount of student debt we're racking up, maybe poker is the way forward for some of these folks. I love this course. Apparently the final was you sat down and played poker, and then you had to perform mathematical equations to figure out your odds to win the hand, and then play the hand out. Amazing. Just amazing. Okay, so if you're a communist on the college campus, which many people are, or a socialist on the college campus, which even more people are, first off, I'm very surprised that you're listening to this podcast. Thanks for being here. But second, if you want to learn how to stage a revolution, Learn that at Ohio State. This is number 6. It compares revolutionary movements in order to help explain why some fail and some succeed. So I'm sure you're going to be going in and studying the Haitian Revolution, the Spanish Revolution, things of that nature. And maybe, just maybe, when that orange man gets bad enough, you can be ready for it. You can really be ready to take over the country in some popular front revolution. Sadly, the Soviets won't be backing you this time, but I'm sure you could find the Chinese Communist Party awfully interested in a revolutionary overthrow of the United States government. Number 5 comes courtesy of the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, and it is pattern making for dog garments. Yes, we need more fashionable good boys. I want to see pictures of dogs in these garments. If we can find them, Twitter minions, search, scour high and low for the final project of this course, because I'm sure it is a chic dog outfit. Anyway, I want to see pictures of your dogs, so post them online and tag me in it. Especially if they have dog garments made from this course. Number 4 comes courtesy of Harvard University. It's called Establishing Loving Spaces for Learning, Nurturing Gender and Sexual Identity Development in U.S. Schools. This course explores both the roles of gender and sexuality in shaping young people's schooling experiences, opportunities, and outcomes, and the role of schooling experiences in shaping young people's notions of gender and sexuality. In many ways, the course is about the hidden curriculum of heteronormativity, or the subtle practices in schools that privilege heterosexual gender identities and ways of being. Okay, if we're going to say that teaching basic biology, that it takes a male and female member of whatever species to procreate, and calling that heteronormative, this is just ignorant of logic, it's ignorant of reason, it's ignorant of all of the work that we've put into the sciences since the ancient Greeks and Romans. We're now just turning against that. We're now just turning against, we may have figured out a lot about how the world works, but that hurts some people's feelings. So we're going to ignore that. We're not going to teach our children that. And what do you think that effect has on children in the long run? Children need to be nurtured and they need to be taught, right? And that's why when you see a child questioning their gender and at a young age, usually by the time they hit puberty, they're more secure in their gender. 85% of gender questioning youths become confident in their gender as soon as they hit puberty. But now, people who purport to support this class are forcing narratives and forcing different treatments even down the throats of young kids who need to be taught what gender roles are in society. Not that gender roles are a good thing or a bad thing, but taught that they do exist and that they do have biological purposes behind them. The course description goes on. As such, students in the course will apply the concept of the hidden curriculum to the study of gender in schooling in order to understand why and how children and youth with different gender identities experience schooling differently, and why and how heteronormative schooling detrimentally impacts all students. Okay, you're going to have to give me some sort of evidence of that. How does heteronormative schooling detrimentally impact all students? Is it the bathroom? Is it biology? Is it learning about heterosexual sex in as the primary method of sex in sexual education in 8th grade? I don't know where this is coming from, but apparently these incredibly qualified sociologists and gender studies professors sat and thought long and hard about silly ideas, have very complex theories that we can achieve utopia if we just follow their intersectional agenda. Okay, if we take all of the intersectional spin off of this, if you give a child whatever they want 24/7, you're going to end up with a spoiled brat of a child. I would know, I was one of them. But that besides the point, this is really, really crucial. Being nice to someone is not the way to love someone. The way to love someone is sometimes giving them that tough love. Number 3, Tailgating 101 at the University of South Carolina. This one's courtesy of Campus Reform. According to their report, the class offers hands-on training in the basic foundations of classic tailgating dishes, including grilling, frying, and braising, basic food safety, and new techniques to create personalized dishes. Yes, dude! Football season is here. We're learning how to tailgate at the University of South Carolina. I might transfer just to take this class. I hope to God the professor is Guy Fieri, who is an absolute legend. But there is a darker side to this, according to the report. The University of South Carolina apparently doesn't offer a course centered on the U.S. founding documents that meets a South Carolina law mandating colleges and universities make a course on these documents for graduation. And actually, in 2014, former university president Harris Pastides wrote the sponsor of the bill, Senator Lawrence Grooms, asking for the bill to be rethought. Now, I don't understand why we should be rethinking bills that say, listen, if your job as a public institution is to educate the next generation of voting citizens, you should be required to teach them what their rights are, where their rights come from, and our system of governance. I mean, really, this is what we ask every single immigrant that comes to this country to do, to learn our way of government, to learn our founding documents, to learn where your rights come from and how they may be revoked in certain cases, and the extent of those rights, because they're not absolute. And so for me, this is a little absurd that they offer tailgating 101 but refuse to teach classes on their founding documents according to financial constraints. But for tailgating in general, all for it. I would love to see more classes like this. It's like outdoor home ec. That's really what it is. It's Guy Fieri's version of home ec. Number 2 is surviving the coming zombie apocalypse, disasters, catastrophes, and human behavior at Michigan State University. Now, apparently, this is a Molly class, which it's an acronym. It's not saying that you're gonna pop Molly and learn about zombies, which actually seems like a very college thing to do in this day and age. But it actually stands for a multimedia online learning immersive experience. Visit their website at zombie.msu.edu/. Honestly, this is hilarious. Checking out this website, they have a full commercial for this class, a full video commercial. I think it's some sort of online course where you're in some virtual reality where you have to make very difficult decisions, and kind of see how in stressful situations human psychology is affected and how civilization as a whole is affected under the circumstances of a zombie apocalypse. So that is super interesting. Super crazy too. Don't get me wrong. This is crazy. Don't spend your money on learning how to survive a zombie apocalypse. It probably won't happen. You're much better off taking some sort of finance or economics class that you can make money off of in the future, or even a political or philosophy class to learn about the history of the United States, to learn about where our rights come from, and to learn about why the American experience is so exceptional and so unique in the history of the world. Now, for your craziest college course being offered this fall 2019, I'll admit it, I'm a bit of a homer. So this one comes from UC Berkeley, and it is called Cop Watch, Community-Based Police Accountability. According to the syllabus, in the Cop Watch course, students will learn about the concepts such as the alternative justice movement and direct field monitoring of police on duty, basic criminal procedure, power analysis, techniques for observing police activity, origins of police resistance movements, as well as community-based alternatives to the justice system. Now, for a requirement for this, like this is 30% of these students' grades in this 2-unit course. Each student must attend at least 5 cop watch shifts to pass the course. Now, shifts are defined as cop watching or participating in office, outreach, or other work to contribute to and better understand community organizing. Cop watching at protests and rallies counts as shifts. So basically what this class does, it says, hey, for 5 times this semester, for X amount of hours, you're going to go out there and you're going to teach people who are just about to break the law kind of how to skirt the edges of it. That if you are some sort of protester for Antifa or for by any means necessary, and you're being rowdy and violating a bunch of municipal codes, that these people are going to come to your aid and teach you how to avoid being detained by the police, how to avoid being moved by the police, etc. Now, this is just absolutely insane, and it comes from a deeply entrenched idea that police are nefarious actors in America. When reality is, if you have a problem with the police enforcing the law, the real problem that you have is with the laws themselves. It is. It's with the laws themselves. If you really think that there is that much systemic racism in the way that we police our communities, then you should go to the municipal the municipal governments, the state governments, and the federal government to have them reevaluate the laws, not to teach the police how to go about policing. Because guess what? Police conduct is also something that is regulated by the law. So if your complaint is, well, the police are too violent, well, you go to the law as well. And that's what I think is super disingenuous about a lot of these police courses. I took policing in society at Berkeley as well, a legal studies course, and that was the main disagreement I had with the professor. And luckily, the professor was pretty sympathetic and understand my viewpoint, kind of a left winger. It wasn't buying into the ideas that he was espousing as he was teaching. So I hope you enjoyed that breakdown of the top 10 craziest college courses that we could find for this fall 2019. And now it is time to move on. As you may well already know, The Elephant in the Room with Bradley Devlin is a for college student by college student podcast. And that's why we think it is important for us to connect you with opportunities to develop your skills and to develop your career and get you more involved in the conservative movement. And that's why I'm telling you about the Heritage Foundation's Young Leaders Program. The Heritage Foundation offers 60 plus paid internships every spring, summer, and fall, and their program attracts young conservative leaders of the highest caliber. I had this internship over the summer, and let me tell you, they are the highest caliber. From Cornell, Yale, Harvard, Berkeley, Georgetown, UCLA, all across the country, East, West, Midwest, South. These people are incredible intellects and will also become great friends. So the Heritage Foundation interns not only get all of these great new friends, they also get to work directly with their prestigious analysts and policymakers. The Heritage Foundation's YLP program trains, equips, and develops tomorrow's young leaders during their time at the Heritage Foundation through educational programs like First Principles lectures, policy briefings, mentorship programs, research, and social gatherings with prominent Heritage Fellows. Trust me, this is definitely not an internship where you're just fetching coffee or making copies or giving people tours of the Capitol building. I last summer was writing op-eds, doing all sorts of research while going to these amazing events. I mean, it is like conservative students' dream summer school. And that's why I'm telling you that Heritage is looking for rising juniors, seniors, and graduate students interested in experiencing DC firsthand for the 2020 spring internship program. You can find a full list of the 60 plus open roles online at www.heritage.org/internships. That's www.heritage.org/internships. Interested applicants should apply by September 23rd. That's not long away, guys. It's 11 days away. So make sure you fill out their online application and get yourself a spot in the spring class of the Young Leaders Program at the Heritage Foundation. All right. So before we go into the more nitty-gritty details of this firing by tweet, I want to discuss who Bolton is as a political player, not only in the administration, but in Washington, D.C. in general. His reputation is twofold. One, he's known as being very hawkish. He's the old-style Secretary of Defense at the podium or press secretary at the podium saying, all options are on the table when they're discussing some sort of geopolitical crisis. People really like to write off John Bolton as a neocon, which is also why traditional conservatives, when John Bolton was initially appointed, thought Trump was bringing a wolf into the henhouse. The neocon label isn't a jump that I'm willing to go to, because if you're a neocon, in my opinion, you are either one, the Irving Kristol-like folks, the original neoconservatives who were liberal in the 60s that became more conservative over the course of the Vietnam War, or two, you're a nation builder, which means that you want to go in, topple regimes, and build a nation more in our image, even if that nation is worse off than it was under the sort of dictatorial or totalitarian regime. So figures from the right and left like to conflate Bolton's hawkishness and willingness to use force as being a nation builder, but this wasn't Bolton's argument for intervention in Iraq, for example. He said for intervention in Iraq that Saddam's WMD program, which at the time every intelligence agency said Iraq was pursuing WMDs, and the funding of terrorism from Iraq was a reason to go in and then give it back to the Iraqis as soon as possible. He also opposed the Arab Spring and has come out in favors of dictators that have been allies or ambivalent towards the US in the past. Also, his position on Syria is misconstrued by people like Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, a guy I generally like and respect, brought Bolton onto his show and insisted that he had a better record on foreign affairs than John Bolton did because John Bolton supported regime change in Iraq and Libya and Syria and every other Middle Eastern country that he could rattle off at the time. But that isn't really John Bolton's perspective on, let's say, Syria. So Bolton in 2012 wrote an op-ed for the National Review that outlined the time to flip the Assad regime had passed, even though the Assad regime was becoming increasingly an Iranian proxy and a present threat to Israel. He feared going in and toppling the Assad regime because of the threat it would fall into the hands of violent Islamic extremists. I quote his article from 2012, "We should do now what we could have begun to do 10 years ago, and what the Obama White House at least says it's doing now. Find Syrian rebel leaders who are truly secular and who oppose radical Islam, who will disavow al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and other terrorist groups, and who will reject Russian and Iranian hegemony over their country. We will need some reason to believe that this opposition can prevail against not only the Assad regime, but also terrorists and fanatics who also oppose Assad." In short, regime change wasn't the way forward in Syria. Even though the conditions on the ground have changed drastically since 2012, I feel like this article is still symbolic of Bolton's line of thinking when he talks about intervention issues and general military presence in countries like Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan. I think this continues to be his line of thinking to this day. Bolton's also known for being a bit of a contrarian and infamous for all sorts of infighting created in the offices that he's served under, which is coming from the kind of dogma he holds while dealing with foreign affairs. And apparently, Bolton initially got the job as national security advisor because Trump liked watching him on Fox News. I'm not joking. This is real life. Bolton went on Fox News, said the president is doing a pretty good job when it comes to foreign affairs, much better than the Obama administration, and like the next day had a job within the administration. So that was a much different story. The Fox News John Bolton apparently was much different than the John Bolton that Trump worked with. When he got to the White House, Bolton didn't pull any punches about what he believes is America's role on the world stage. For example, Bolton predominantly opposed negotiations with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un without some sort of concrete demilitarization, denuclearization, or normalization from the regime. Bolton also opposed negotiations with the Taliban, a terrorist organization that has been attempting to regain their control over the country since the beginning of Operation Enduring Freedom in 2001. He also opposed making large overtures to them in order to get them to the table. Eventually, and obviously, this would lead to John Bolton's departure from the Trump administration. So let's break down both cases, the North Korean case and the Taliban peace talks case, which the Taliban peace talks have broken down in recent days, to see if John Bolton was right in holding these positions. So first, in the case of North Korea, the first round of negotiations resulted in only a 400 some odd word document that had four main points and included, somewhat path to denuclearization, a peaceful coexistence between North and South Korea, a peaceful existence between North Korea and the United States, as well as the return of POW and MIA remains, to America. So Bolton is an expert in nuclear proliferation. I wrote about this summit at the time because of a conversation I had with Bolton at an SFGOP dinner earlier that year, where I talked to him about North Korean nuclear power and what the US should do about it. I mean, this guy knows everything. He knows the entire background of the nuclear peace talks since the early 90s. He's one of the most well-versed and well-respected individuals on this topic. So his word in Washington, D.C. holds a lot of weight on this stuff. So he was very upset over the results because the North Koreans had previously promised every concession that Trump got. That's something that Bolton knew that Trump probably didn't, because Trump's command over North Korean nuclear proliferation history, I don't think, is nearly as strong as John Bolton's. In 1993, during Kim Jong-il's reign, the North Koreans reneged on their ratification of the Non-Proliferation Treaty less than a year after it came into effect, when the IAEA attempted to gain more information about North Korea's nuclear program. Now, later that June, President Clinton and Kim Jong-il signed the first bilateral U.S.-North Korea agreement that promised to delay North Koreans' departure from the NPT. It promised, and I quote, "peace and security, nuclear-free Korean peninsula, support for the peaceful reunification of Korea, and assurances against the use of force." Does that sound familiar? Because that sounds exactly like the overture Trump got from Un. Then, the agreed framework of 94 actually gave North Korea light water reactors for electricity, as it was encouraging North Korea to freeze its nuclear development, which is just as insane as it sounds, and it is the exact same mistake the Obama administration made during the creation of the JCPOA. The agreed framework on top of that promised a full normalization of political and economic relations with the ultimate goal of peace and security on a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. So there's the point that discusses peace between the US and North Korea, as well as a reiteration of finding peace on the Korean peninsula. So now we fast forward to 2002. The North Koreans used liquidity freed up by Clinton's deal to build up their nuclear capabilities behind the scenes, and in 2003, China opened up the doors for negotiations with North Korea and invited the US, South Korea, Japan, and Russia to join them. These were called the Six Party Talks, and they can be summarized in one sentence from the document. The DPRK committed to abandoning all nuclear weapons and existing nuclear programs and returning at an early date to the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and to IAEA safeguards. Obviously, the North Koreans would go on to continue starving their people and build missiles and develop nuclear weapons and test them. And as for returning the POW and MIA remains, this is undoubtedly a positive, but it's been going on for a long time, and oftentimes the United States has to pay the North Koreans to get those remains back. And then earlier this year, talks in Vietnam fell through because North Korea refused to dismantle its nuclear program without complete sanction relief from the United States. Kim Jong-un apparently walked away without another deal because Trump wasn't willing to do that without a comprehensive plan that included verification and inspections. Trump's criterion of what constituted a good deal that included verification and inspections, that's coming straight from Bolton's mouth. So in the end, when Kim Jong-un walks away from these negotiations, and Trump, being the negotiator that he is, also said, I'm willing to walk away and continue to have your economy repressed and your people repressed if you don't normalize the way you treat your people and you don't normalize the way that you treat other countries. So in the end, Bolton was right. North Korea isn't ready for normalization on the world stage. And luckily, Trump didn't make a bad deal. Trump walking away from the deals isn't necessarily a bad thing. Having a no-deal situation is much better than having a bad deal. And the Iran deal, the JCPOA, is a testament to that. And so, like North Korea, the Taliban aren't ready to negotiate either. I think I've laid out a pretty decent argument on why John Bolton was right about North Korea. North Korea is not ready to normalize. North Korea is not ready to go through with a comprehensive denuclearization plan and plans on imprisoning its political adversaries within the country, as well as starving its own population. And the Taliban aren't ready to negotiate either. This story from Peter Barker, Mujib Mashal, and Michael Crowley over at the New York Times talks about the breakdown of the Camp David meeting between some Afghani officials, some Taliban leaders, and also President Donald Trump. So on Friday before Labor Day, President Trump gathered top advisors in the Situation Room to consider what could be among the profound decisions of his presidency: a peace plan with the Taliban after 18 years of grinding bloody war in Afghanistan. The deal called for a gradual withdrawal of the remaining 14,000 American troops over 16 months, with about 5,000 of them leaving within 135 days. In return, the Taliban would provide counterterrorism assurances to ease America's fears of a repeat of September 11th coming from Afghan soil. The meeting brought to a head a bristling conflict dividing his foreign policy team for months, pitting Secretary of State Mike Pompeo against John Bolton, the national security advisor, in a battle for the competing instincts of a president who relishes tough talk but promised to wind down America's endless wars. As they discussed terms of the agreement, Mr. Pompeo and his negotiator, Zalmay Khalilzad, made the case that it would enable President Trump to begin withdrawing troops while securing a commitment from the Taliban not to shelter terrorists. Mr. Bolton, beaming in by video from Warsaw where he was visiting, argued that Mr. Trump could keep with his campaign pledge to draw down forces without getting in bed with killers swathed in American blood. Mr. Trump made no decision on the spot, but at some point during the meeting, the idea was floated to finalize the negotiation in Washington, a prospect that appealed to the president's penchant for dramatic spectacle. Mr. Trump suggested that he would even invite President Ghani of Afghanistan, whose government had not been party to the talks, and get him to sign on. Now, the story goes on. In the days that followed, Mr. Trump came up with an even more remarkable idea. He would not only bring the Taliban to Washington, but to Camp David, the crown jewel of the American presidency. The leaders of a rugged militant organization deemed terrorist by the United States would be hosted in the mountain getaway used for presidents, prime ministers, and kings. But Taliban leaders, having refused to negotiate directly with the Afghan government until after the group had an agreement with the United States, said the Americans were tricking them into political suicide. A senior Taliban leader said on Sunday that Mr. Trump was fooling himself to think that he could bring the Taliban and Mr. Ghani together at Camp David, because we do not recognize the stooge government in Kabul. The Americans were also rushing to finalize outstanding issues in the days before the last-minute proposed Camp David meeting. Among the most significant was a disagreement over the release of thousands of Taliban prisoners in Afghan prisons. Mr. Ghani's government found that unacceptable, saying it would agree only if the Taliban reciprocated with an extensive ceasefire, something the insurgents are reluctant to do at this stage of talks since violence is their main leverage. Oh, you don't say. A terrorist organization is not too keen on a ceasefire? Shocking. Anyway, the story continues. When Mr. Khalilzad and General Austin S. Miller, the American commander in Afghanistan, returned to Doha on Thursday, Doha is in Qatar, where a lot of these conversations have been happening with the Taliban, it was to finalize technical appendices to the main text. The Taliban negotiators got no sense that anything was amiss and later posted on Twitter that the atmosphere was good. But the same day, aides told Mr. Trump about a suicide car bomb attack that killed an American soldier as well as 11 others. At this point, according to senior officials, Mr. Trump and his team were unified. He could not host Taliban leaders at Camp David just days after an American was killed, even though it was unclear whether the insurgents had actually agreed to come in the first place. This is off. We can't do this, Mr. Trump told his aides, according to one official. In other words, Bolton was right again. The Taliban is a militant, extremist, Islamist organization, and they are not interested in peace talks whatsoever. They want to implement by violent means a theocratic domination of the region, even though they don't share the world domination type of theocracy that Al-Qaeda purports to hold close. They certainly aren't interested in any sort of serious peace talks. All of this may make you wonder how Bolton was able to stay in as national security advisor, given the deep divisions Trump and Bolton had when it came to foreign policy. Rich Lowry over at the National Review is essentially arguing that John Bolton's well over his expected value as national security advisor. Bolton wasn't and has never been afraid to ruffle feathers, speaking forthrightly about why this course was a mistake, even when the decision seemed to be going the other way, says Lowry. It's important that this president, any president, get unvarnished advice from his aides, and Bolton is always willing to provide it. So essentially what Lowry is saying is Trump is generally a thin-skinned man when it comes to matters of his political ego, even though he has some large political cojones at some points, if you will. And the people that he surrounds himself with in advisory positions, he likes to have stroke his ego. And I think there's credence to this argument that despite Trump's determination to be perceived as the deal maker, even within his own administration, reconciling Pompeo and Bolton's point of views, he might have gotten sick and tired of the I told you so's coming from Bolton on two of Trump's biggest foreign policy objectives that he's sworn to have completed by 2020, along with the wall and healthcare and everything else. Now, I really do think Bolton was able to last this long despite his contrarian ways. And there's actually an Axios story that came out about this a few months ago, that Trump liked to play good cop and bad cop with Bolton. And he thought that Bolton represented the American military might and willingness to be forceful if needed, and Trump was the more pragmatic approach. Bolton was the big stick, Trump was the carrot. And no, Trump wasn't the carrot because he's an orange man bad or anything like that. But for once in his political career, Trump could be seen as the pragmatic one, as the one who could sit down and calmly negotiate like an adult. And so this Axios story is actually really, really funny. And it outlines a bunch of times Trump just digs on Bolton for his hawkish views. So apparently, for an the first example that we're going to go through, while making small talk with the Irish Prime Minister in the Oval Office, Trump asks Bolton, "John, is Ireland one of those countries you want to invade?" That's not it, too. That's not it. It gets better and better and better. According to another source, Trump said, "John has never seen a war he doesn't like." And I can't even hold the impression. John has never seen a war he doesn't like. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he's bought into the traditional conservatives calling John Bolton a bit of a neocon, which, is kind of why he knew John. It's why I tend to buy into the art of the deal argument, where he knew John Bolton wasn't on his team, quote unquote, even though he was in the administration. He definitely had different perspectives on foreign policy than his administration, but it kept him around saying, hey, listen, this guy, former UN ambassador, worked with the last Republican president that we had, and look at how much different and how much more willing I am to negotiate than he is. He wants to bomb everybody. So finally, the last example that this Axios article gives is in a Situation Room meeting last year. Apparently, Trump joked when all of the advisors were talking and it came around to Bolton, "Okay, John, let me guess. You want to nuke them all?" And people in the room died laughing. Could you imagine being in the same room? President cracks a joke during a geopolitical crisis. My goodness. So really, in summary, the main question now remains whether or not Trump will keep in line with someone who is more adversarial in the NSA position in order to kind of play off them like he did Bolton and present this good cop, bad cop mentality, or will he go forward with someone that will stroke his ego and tell him what a great idea it is to have Taliban visit Camp David and to write a 400-page document and pay for the remains of North Korean soldiers to come back to the United States without any serious step towards denuclearization from North Korea? So that remains to be seen. I hope Trump is a little bit stronger on those two main foreign policy issues moving forward. And if that means bringing someone who's not as adversarial as John Bolton, but still a little bit more firm in the American tradition of not normalizing rogue regimes, I'm definitely for that. I want to tell you about 3 incredible opportunities coming up very soon, thanks to the Leadership Institute. The Leadership Institute has a journalism career school that will be taking place in Arlington, Virginia on September 18th through the 20th. Attendees will learn about traditional broadcast, watchdog, and citizen journalism. It's currently $50 to attend, but the price raises to $75 on the 16th. So hurry up. You got 5 days. Sign up for it at www.leadershipinstitute.org/training. You can find it there. That's www.leadershipinstitute.org/training. Also, they have a Leadership Institute's activism workshop that'll be taking place in Miami, Florida on October 10th through the 12th. So if you're a Florida Republican, make sure to go to that. Figure out how you can be an effective activist on campus or in other nonprofit organizations, etc. Also, the Leadership Institute's free conservative internship workshop will be taking place in Arlington, Virginia on September 27th. This helps with networking, understanding finances, and where to find opportunities in the ever-expanding career field of the conservative movement. So again, make sure to visit www.leadershipinstitute.org/training to learn about all of these opportunities and more as they arise. Now it is time for one of my favorite segments for the show that we've come up with, and it is called How About That. It's where I take a lone conservative piece in the last 2 weeks, break it down, shout out the author, and add my own spin on it as well. So for the first ever How About That, we're going to look at Jake Gonzalez's piece called Cancel Culture's Latest Victim, University of Alabama's Dean of Students. Now, you may be familiar with the term cancel culture. Cancel culture has come for Kyle Kashuv because he said some racist things in a private Google Doc back when he was 15 years old. For Kyler Murray because he said some homophobic things on Twitter when he was 15 years old. For Dave Chappelle, for every single figure in public life, essentially. And it usually begins with some journalist going through your social media from 10 to 15 years ago, digging up these things, and then publishing a piece that says, tweets have recently resurfaced. And then all of a sudden you realize, you read the piece, that this journalist has just literally gone through the last 15 years of your public life and public statements to find something to hit you over the head with because they want to see you implode. And this, my friends, is a warning. As a young conservative person who is well familiar with the kind of crap posting meme culture that is associated in some conservative circles, refrain from it on social media entirely. Refrain from it. It will only come back to haunt you. Do you think that these people's lives were made that much better by the joke that they cracked on Twitter that is now coming to haunt them in their professional life? Or the statement that they made that doesn't truly represent their views, but they were out of characters on Twitter. So, screw it. I'm going to say something absolutely outrageous and afactual that's now coming back to haunt them. You really should take into consideration what you put on social media, as have I. I've almost been, called out for some things that I've said in the past. I've apologized for them and gone back, deleted the tweets, told people I've deleted the tweets, and moved on with my life. Know why? Because I was 14, 15, 16 years old. I'm now 21 years old, and I continue to say dumb things. I continue to make mistakes, but that does not mean that people should go after others and just cancel them and cancel their well-being. That being said, let's dive into the piece. On Thursday, the University of Alabama's Dean of Students, Jamie Riley, resigned due to some of his old tweets resurfacing, where he stated that the American flag represents systemic racism. Now, if you've been on the American campus any time past the year 2000, you know that this is a commonly held position in academia that is largely dominated by the intersectional left. This is no surprise to me that a Dean of Students would say something like this. However, even though the conservative instinct in me, the crap posting conservative instinct in me that I was talking about earlier says, God bless the University of Alabama, roll tide, that's not the way that we should be going about these situations. I mean, this is getting absolutely absurd. Breitbart is now playing by the left's rules and going through and being the journalists that dig up comments from 10, 20 years ago to try to make someone's well-being and career implode. Do you want to guess how many tweets this Breitbart expose found? 3. 3 tweets to ruin this administrator's well-being. Now, this administrator is a leftist. Okay, I get it. There's tons of leftist administrators at UC Berkeley alone. Leftist administrators dominate campuses all around the country. Conservatives are the people who stand athwart history yelling stop. Now, we stand athwart history yelling stop at political correctness and all of the other foolishness like intersectionality that these leftist administrators are bringing in. But for us to buy into cancel culture, that's been the favorite tool of some awful bad intentioned journalists in the past few years is absolutely something we should refrain from, because it's only driving us closer and closer to a precipice where we can no longer maintain a civil society with one another and can no longer retain the Constitution and the way of American governance that John Adams says is fit only for a moral and religious people. Now, cancel culture is trying to fill that void. We have all this anger and all this uncertainty in our lives, and we want to fill that void with some sort of mob mentality, some mob violence, some groupthink that we can get in on an in-group and feel like we're involved, because everything else, right, our neighbors' relationships, the relationships that we have with our community, the relationships that we have to our church and charities, they're all falling by the wayside. So I guess it's just an urge to be a part of something. But as many political philosophers have said, a democracy of vile people will be a vile country. This is exactly what cancel culture does. It sets up a civil society where there are only sinners, and the only way that you can receive forgiveness from sins is bowing to some sort of mob that is after you. That is the only way that you can repent, is say sorry to the mob, bow to them, and listen to the mob shame you for the rest of your days. And this is absolutely ridiculous. And I think Jake Gonzalez does a good job pointing them out. He says this is something that needs to stop. We need to stop ruining people's lives over a couple of tweets or things that they said 20 years ago. Dave Chappelle, in his new show on Netflix, Sticks and Stone, said it best when calling out cancel culture. He says, "Hey, if you do anything wrong in your life, and I find out about it, I'm going to take everything away from you. And I don't care when I find out. Could be today, could be tomorrow, 15, 20 years from now. If I find out, you're finished." If you haven't watched Dave Chappelle's new special, maybe try to find a clean version first, because it is riddled with profanity. But this is exactly what he's going for in this special. He wants to call out the woke scold by being so crazy that the woke scold comes after him. And that is exactly what happened in the wake of this Sticks and Stones comedy special on Netflix airing. It's exactly what happened. They came after Dave Chappelle and said, "Oh, he says horrible things about abortion and women and uses the N-word." Yes, that's been part of Dave Chappelle's stick since the 80s, and he's doing it even more so to just rub it in your face and show you how insane that you are. But Dave Chappelle's absurdities aside, what cancel culture is trying to do is enter the realm of rights. Because we are so prone in the present day and age to try to define everything as a right, the things that we don't have rights for can certainly be stripped away. And that's what they're doing. They're going in and saying, you know what? You don't have a right to go to Harvard. So what I can do is create a mob by digging through your Twitter and bringing up old tweets and then saying somehow they magically reappeared and magically resurfaced, and then having that mob go to Harvard and make them rescind your admission. And this is incredibly dangerous for our society, because now it's creeping in to the actual rights we have protected in the Constitution by law. See, this is the thing. It's not about the fact that you're going to Harvard that ticks them off. That's not it. What ticks them off is that you said those things, or you had that opinion in the first place. And since that opinion is not going to fly with the mob, well, the mob will do everything in their power without doing something illegal to strip your well-being away. And that's a big problem, because it takes away the devices in society that enable people's betterment. If we exile everyone who's ever done something wrong and never let them fully atone for their sins through their actions, we're going to end up with a society with no society at all. Forget about having a society of moral depravity, of hopelessness, of people who are exiled and all stay in their own realms with absolutely no communication with one another. I mean, no society at all. The United States has been doing this for years. I called it the big government binary in a piece that I wrote for Daily Wire. Is when we rely too much on the government and we rely too much on this type of top-down control of other individuals' actions, we lose sense and respect for one another's choices in life. So the question now becomes, how do we fight against cancel culture? And the fight against cancel culture is two fronts. One, it takes place on the individual level. All of us in society as individuals have to stop buying into this mob mentality, this groupthink mentality that's taking over politics and taking over the campus and taking over our corporations and taking over social media especially. We have to not buy into this mob mentality, and we have to fight those who try to rile us up into it. And those are the people from the media, whether they're Breitbart or New York Times, that dig through people's past and bring up tweets. So we have to stand up sometimes for people that we don't like. And that's going to make us better as a country in the long run. Whether these public figures are on the right or on the left, we have to stand up for them and protect the rights of every individual and protect the capabilities for these people to mature, to better themselves by being involved in American society. American society is a place where people can mature and can get better and can elevate themselves more so than any other country in the world because of the rights given to us in the Constitution. Before we get into our next segment, I want to tell you guys about Lone Conservative's great merchandise. They have water bottles, hats, great shirts. I'm wearing my Lone Conservative shirt right now. I know you can't see it, but it looks great on me. So make sure you visit loneconservative.com to not only read the fantastic commentary, but also buy some merch, support our website. And with that, it's time to do our last segment for the show. I know, it's gone by fast. It's been a lot of fun. We're going to be back here in 2 weeks, and we're going to be doing it all again. So we're going to see you here. But now it is time for our Warrior of the Week. Now, the Warrior of the Week segment is going to be shouting out the great work of an activist or a member of law enforcement or a philanthropist or a veteran every single week to kind of end our show on a note of positivity, because there's so much negativity today in our politics and in our news media that every once in a while we need to be reminded that there are good people doing good things in our communities every single day, and they don't get the proper recognition they get for it. So this week, I want to recognize a bunch of students who did something absolutely fantastic. As you all know, yesterday was the 18th anniversary of 9/11. 18 years. Absolutely blows my mind that it's been that long. You know, I was 3 years old when the Twin Towers came down, and I still remember that day pretty vividly. I remember my mom freaking out as it was happening on TV and not knowing whether or not to take me to school. As me and my friends were talking earlier this week about how crazy it is that this will be the last freshman class that to come in as a freshman to have been born before 9/11, or at least some of them born before 9/11. So even though these kids are getting younger, it's still really, really important that we keep remembering the individuals who fought for our freedom abroad. So as 9/11 fades further back into our country's memory, we have to keep fostering that community and that coming together that these tragic events had on our country. We see divisiveness all around us, and it's important to remind ourselves that people answered the call to go and fight for our country, to protect our rights, and to protect American citizens from radical, violent extremists who wanted to do us harm from thousands of miles away. And that's why I'm so happy to shout out YAF's 9/11 Project. Now, if you don't know YAF, they are the Young America's Foundation. They are a fantastic on-campus organization. You should try any way you can to get involved, and look them up on Twitter at YAF. At YAF, and you can scroll through and look at the pictures from the 9/11 Project yesterday from college campuses and high school campuses all over the country. What YAF does is they send a bunch of flags to these different college and high school groups, and they make 9/11 memorials on their campus. I mean, they are absolutely stunning. Florida State University, Walnut High School, Stanford University, Regent University, Maryville University, Concordia University, Irvine, Southern Illinois University, the College of Lake County. Oh, and the College of Lake County photos are so amazing because members of law enforcement saw them setting it up and they stopped to plant a flag as well. Colorado State University, UT Arlington, Loyola Marymount, Abilene Christian University, Southern Methodist University, UC Berkeley, Whitworth University, and it goes on and on and on and on. Thousands and thousands and thousands of flags all across the country were planted yesterday in remembrance of those 2,977 individuals that we lost on 9/11. So I applaud you, those brave students who to not only remember those individuals that we lost on that tragic day, but also to have a sense of coming together, that we will weather the storms that come towards us if they come out in natural disasters or horrible attacks on our nation like we saw 18 years ago, or even political infighting that is so common today. So I applaud you one more time. And that'll do it for us here at The Elephant in the Room with Bradley Devlin. I'll see you next time. I'll see you next time. I'll see you next time.